Welcome back to the Man of Mastery podcast, where we're meeting and learning from men and women, thought leaders in personal optimization and elite level life performance.
What is it that drives you to live your life a certain way? Life has a way of leaving the breadcrumbs for you.
Man of Mastery, episode 8. I'm really excited. I've been waiting for this one for a while. Today we speak with CJ Kirk, or Chief Kirk as he's known in the Krav Maga self-defense community. Chief is much, much more than just a world-class self-defense coach. He's also a life coach, crucible coach, author, speaker, thought leader. Today we talk about his thought leadership in things such as personal ethos, purpose, community, self-discovery, service, the epidemic plaguing first world cultures, and powerful ways we can begin to act. Before we jump in, I'd like to say thanks again for all the reviews, the ratings, the help, support, comments. I really super appreciate it. Please keep them coming. Okay, this week's iTunes review of the week. This comes from Ale2025, who says, "I love this podcast. I can't stop listening." Well, I love the feedback. I will keep doing my best to pass along things I find helpful and that I find valuable for you guys. Let's get yours up there next. Go over to manofmastery.com/iTunes to link to iTunes, hit subscribe, and leave us a review. I'm honored to welcome today Chief CJ Kirk. Chief, thanks for being here.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here, Michael. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I set you up with a little bit of an intro, but would you tell us a little bit more about, I think of you as a bit of a serial entrepreneur, and you have a lot of things going on in and around Krav Maga. So could you introduce a little bit to those who aren't familiar about what Krav Maga explicitly is, how it came into your life, and why it's important to you?
Sure, those are big ideas, big questions.
Okay.
Krav Maga was developed in Israel. It means contact combat, loosely translated. It is a self-defense system. And I found Krav Maga 21 years ago after being robbed at gunpoint, having done things like Kung Fu and Jiu-Jitsu, and having grown up in the UFC age, if you will. And when I was robbed at gunpoint, I realized I don't know what to do about this. I'm not sure what to do. And that left me feeling uncomfortable, unprepared, and the search for something different started. And I landed on Krav Maga 21 years ago.
Yeah, I think I've heard that story, and it just seems so different from the sport-based martial arts that it's intriguing to me that you had studied a number of things and then ultimately found yourself in a real-world situation that didn't prepare you at all.
Yeah, there's a marked difference between martial arts, which is one thing broadly, fighting, which is something else, and self-defense, which is sort of a third category of the martial disciplines. And self-defense is sort of defined by this idea that you start at a position of disadvantage, because no one runs across the parking lot to someone else and says, "Hey, I saw your wallet bulging in your back pocket. Let's fight for it." You're ambushed. You're put in a position of disadvantage. And so the way that I typically describe it to somebody is, if you want to be a fighter, watch the UFC. That's kind of what you want to be. If you want to, do self-defense, that's more of like a Jason Bourne type concept. And for me, it was a stark difference once I'd gone through being robbed at gunpoint. Remember, when you're robbed at gunpoint, it's not just that you're robbed at gunpoint. It's that someone has your wallet. Someone has your driver's license. Someone has your address. Someone has your credit cards. Someone has the little notes you keep to yourself about who you should be, who you want to be, who you're going to be. Love letters from someone special. And so the violation is pretty powerful. And in some parts of the world, some people would call that a biological ignition. In other words, a powerful need to address that problem. And that's where I found myself when I started training in Krav Maga. I think it's ironic, I think it's worth pointing out, and I think it's powerful for people to remember that what at the time seemed like powerfully wrong or tragic events often lead to a powerful future. And you can, look throughout history to find examples of that. And if you ever go through something personal where you feel like you've been wronged or violated, or you've gone through some sort of personal tragedy, there is an opposite and equal sort of positive reality on the other side of that. It might be, 30 minutes from then, or it might be 30 years from then, but it's there. And if you work for it, you'll find it.
Yeah, that is definitely powerful. So we've been talking a lot about that here. Those challenges, sometimes they might be things we design, sometimes it's what happens to us in life. But you bring up a really good point, is you have to work at it, and it may not be immediate, far from it. Part of it seems to be keeping your mind and your eyes open to recognizing and making those associations, and having some awareness of one bad thing or tough thing or hard thing leading to something equal or maybe more than equally positive on the other side.
Yeah, I think if you are, I think you said manufactured, if you're manufacturing a hardship or a crucible, if you're climbing a mountain or doing a particular type of adventure race or testing yourself in some way, and you think it's about the physical domain, you've missed the point entirely. And there's a connection between what you're trying to learn about yourself, what you're trying to discover about what needs to happen next in your life, that runs far beyond physical into the mental, emotional, intuitive, and spirit. And if you miss that, if you're just working out and you're trying to defeat the crucible so that you can tell other people you defeated the crucible for another notch on your belt, you're living in a shell of the life you could be living in. There's no point in doing a crucible to say you did it. It is entirely personal, and it's something that, if you do this in a powerful way, will lead you to something much more significant in the future. It could be your relationship with your spouse. It could be your relationship with your kids or your best friend or your tribe. It could be a discovery about how you conduct yourself in the world, that you've kind of been an a-hole for most of your life. These are the things we have to discover. We don't need to flex our muscles and say, oh, I did the Spartan March last year, so look at what I did. It's a mistake.
The deeper purpose and the why. And so before we get too far down that path, you had a moment of self-discovery that led you personally into Krav Maga. You are now, I've gotten to know you a bit through Krav Maga Houston. You're, in my words, my assessment, a very humble leader in that worldwide organization, hugely respected, third-degree black belt, and you have a system of schools for Krav Maga, amongst the other things you do, where you have a level of seniority and experience and quality in coaches that you bring to the community and students that I believe is unparalleled.
Well, that's a great endorsement. I think the key, at least as you were talking, that seized me was this. People ask me, how did you decide to do Krav Maga as a business? And I think you have to recognize that there is a unique, distinct place in the world for each person, and part of that discovery process for me was with Krav Maga. And what I mean is this: think of 3 spheres and think of them pushed together so that they have interlapping or shared space. One sphere is passion, and passion can be defined in lots of different ways, but I look at it as what ignites you in life, what recharges you, what renews you, what are you connected to in a way that's undeniable. Another sphere are your principles, which is a whole other discussion about something called personal ethos and personal leadership. But what is it that drives you to live your life a certain way? What are those principles, whether they're courage or integrity or love or grace or forgiveness or excellence? And then there's a third sphere, which is potential, which is when you bring your physical, your mental, your emotional, your intuitive, and your spirit together towards a specific goal. That shared space, in my view, and the way that I see things, is where you begin to discover your purpose. because it brings together who you are and how you are made, with your free will, with your will to be selfish, with your will to serve, with your will to be open-minded or closed-minded. Obviously, purpose is something that is both chosen and almost imbued upon someone in how they are created. So for me, the discovery was, if I can advocate and teach and mentor, and I can do that through a passion of mine, which is Krav Maga, and I can run my business or my program through the principles or those sacred things I hold most dear, then I'm doing something that's unique and distinct to me. I'm expressing my purpose, and I'm doing something that's inherently good. I sleep good at night. I love what I do. Frankly, I love the people around me and the community that allow me to do this. And it's an amazing way, in my view, for me to live life. I never would have imagined as a young person I would be where I am doing what I'm doing. But it just shows you that there is a level of self-discovery that has to be embarked upon to begin to understand where those three spheres, passion, principle, and potential meet. And life has a way of leaving the breadcrumbs for you. So whatever success I might have had in business is really and within the community and in developing instructors, is really a function of understanding how to direct and drive my passion, my principles, and my potential into something that is inherently good, it inherently serves, and is unique and distinct to me. Does that make sense?
No, it makes a lot of sense, and I'll take a quick opportunity for a plug here. You've done a lot of writing on this on your blog website, Kravology, kravology.com. I'll put a link to it in the show notes for this episode for people who are interested and frankly should go out there and start to read and listen. And I think you leave some breadcrumbs there, not in terms of explicit direction. A lot of times it's challenge in asking people, setting up some ideas and then asking people to think and come to their own answers. And for yourself, when you had some events that drove you in a new direction and you aligned your purpose, your principles, your passion, your potential, and manifested a purpose in what you do through Krav Maga. So again, just in curiosity about a few business aspects of that. So you've got an incredible mission, but aligning those things for ourselves as individuals and serving a worthy purpose doesn't always make for a successful business, right? And you've been at it there at Krav Maga Houston for, I believe, a couple decades. How has that gone? Just, if we back up at the 50,000 foot level, for people who do embark in startup businesses, in their own entrepreneurial endeavors, do you have the highs and lows? Were there dark spots over the years, challenges, the classic dip sort of a thing that, again, I guess we can go back to maybe your initial concept. Sometimes those dark and hard days lead you to something equally better in the end.
That's true. I believe if you're starting a business for the right reason, and what I specifically mean is if you're starting a business and your only motivation is profit, in my view, sample of one, I think there's not a lot of meaning in that. And while you might be successful, two things will happen. The first one will be that the energy and drive and excitement of the actual journey will be much more powerful than getting to where it is you think you want to go. You're going to find sort of an empty, meaningless goal at the end of that process. And it's because we're not making meaning. It's because we thought this is what we should be doing because we're listening to all the wrong people. It's because people get over 1 million marketing messages a year, at least in the United States, saying this is what you should hope for, this is what you should work for. It's just not true. And as a result, people chase dreams. The chase is much more exciting and powerful than the actual achieving of whatever dream they have, because in the end it's meaningless. And you can look through life and see that wealthy people are, just as unhappy as everybody else. But in terms of dips in business, there have been several. I think the thing that has been most powerful for me is in those times to remember what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, why it's so important, and to remember that I'm a steward of these things. And for me to get down or to allow my potential or my passion or my principles to be affected by these dips is at some level immoral, Michael. I have a purpose. You might even look at it as a calling. And the context in which I fulfill that purpose today is in teaching Krav Maga, and it may be that way for a long time. But my biggest focal point when things go sideways or people that I trust and invest in leave or otherwise, act in ways that are disappointing, when the financial results aren't what I was hoping for, when I see people that I love and respect struggling and making poor decisions, I have to remember that it's my job to carry my water, and it's my job to try to figure out how to do that in a way and show up in a way that's most powerful for the people around me. If you are an advocate for your customer and your customer becomes a community and you can connect with those people, the results are powerful. And I would say to entrepreneurs, never get away from that. The moment you do is the moment you become, too large or too disconnected. And that's one thing I never want to do in my business, is become so disconnected that I can't have a sort of community-like atmosphere wherever I am and wherever the people associated with my business are. So yeah, there are ups and downs, there are dips, and that's a natural progression. The world around us is designed that way. There are seasons. You will have seasons in your business. It's natural. Stay the course. Focus on your purpose. Dig in. Hold tight. It will turn. That's my advice in a nutshell.
No, I like it. So yeah, I mean, we have to expect those trials. I like your insight on sort of your qualitative metric of maybe what's too big, to paraphrase, and you want to make sure that you don't get so big that there's a loss of community or a sense of community. I spoke to another startup venture recently, a veteran who has started an American-based watch company, and he said something interesting to me about scale, and he really wants to make sure that he never gets so big that he no longer has that sort of personal connection to clientele, to customers, to his community, and maybe community amongst the recipients or the customers is a little bit of a different way to think about it. It may not always be CJ Kirk, but there's this community, and maybe back to your word steward and what you're doing that serves a purpose through this business that at the moment for you and may for a long time be Krav Maga, in really bringing value, focusing on bringing value to your coaches and your students. As that continues to be your focal point, it seems to me that you've really made an emphasis on quality in coaches. I don't know if the quality of your students has been a specific design, but that seems to be there. And you've done some other things that seem to push the envelope as well. You've incorporated meditation, yoga, more of the mindfulness aspects. Is that part of the same pursuit as well? And is that something unique for Krav Maga?
Yeah, I think in terms of our community, we are as broad and as welcoming as we can be. I think, there's a brand promise, if we want to talk more sort of business school language, that each organization that's successful has to deliver on. And our brand promise, in a nutshell, is to advocate for people in a way that's powerful. That means that we are there for them outside of Krav Maga, and that during the class they're getting world-class instruction. And if they have a question, I always tell my students, if you have a question, I can answer. It doesn't matter what it is. It's about Krav Maga, I can answer your question. And people often say, why do you say that? And I said, because if I can't do that, I'm in the wrong business. I shouldn't be doing what I'm doing. And that promise creates a community, and within that community, leaders bubble up. And some of those leaders are what we call advocates, and some of them are talented in multiple ways, and they become instructors. And I think that for us, our brand promise, our explicit focus on creating an environment where people are supported and can get world-class training in Krav Maga sort of facilitates the bubbling up of instructors out of our community. I'd say in terms of yoga or breath or visualization or meditation that these are ways to harness and exercise, the mental, emotional, the intuitive, and the spirit in ways that people don't often think about when they think about Krav Maga. And so it's a broadening of that sphere I talked about earlier, which is potential. It's made up of physical, mental, emotional, intuitive, and spirit. So for us, it's another way to support our students, another way for our students to shift their perspective around training in self-defense and what self-defense is. And of all those things, in my view, helping them with breath is by far the most powerful. If you can't control your breath, you can't control your physiology. If you can't control your physiology, you can't control your psychology. And that's obviously a big issue in self-defense and in stressful training.
Yeah, no doubt. So maybe take that opportunity to ask you briefly about breath and in particular your routine. Do you have a daily routine around breath? Is it a morning routine? Do you have anything in that realm you'd like to share?
Well, I think if you think of breath, when I first started learning about breath, I thought, okay, this is autonomic. This is something we do without thinking about it. So ask yourself, what happens when you shift that into a conscious endeavor? Breath is, and for lack of a better word, fuel. It's how we oxygenate our blood. It's how we regulate, and oftentimes our emotion and our mental stability or toughness. And so breath for me is a powerful tool. What I typically do is I will box breathe in the morning. And if I'm going through powerfully different stages of the day where my role is shifting dramatically, I'll box breathe wherever I'm in a transitional place. For instance, if I've had a tough meeting or I'm really frustrated about something and I'm pulling in my driveway, I often find it's a good idea to box breathe or to use breath in some form as I transition from entrepreneur to husband or dad. So breath practices have a settling, centering effect on us. And for me, breath is not only that, but it's a doorway into the potential into physical, mental, emotional, intuitive, and spirit. Depending on how you're using breath, how long you're using breath, and what your intention is, breath is your doorway. I think that's the easiest way to say it.
Very cool. So, and just to recap real briefly there, so box breathing in the morning and as a transition tool and as a tool for broadening that sphere. So can we talk about that concept of the doorway? Breath is one doorway that you just mentioned. Krav Maga, I think, for you and your practice and your community has also been a doorway to something that's more than just the explicit self-defense science. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, Krav Maga is this practice of performing during what a lot of people feel like is the unthinkable. And when it's couched that way, when you use that perspective and you embody that, there's a fair amount of stress. There's fear. There's uncertainty, not only about what is happening, but what will happen. Will I make it through this? Will I be enough to protect my family or my friend or my loved ones? How will I do this? And so Krav Maga is this, in this case, the centerpiece of training that allows us to explore the relationship between stress, fear, the uncertainty, our capacity to manage and perform, and breath. And that's why breath has been such an integral part of a lot of our advanced training. It allows us to practice taking control of something that's out of control. When you're under stress, your heart rate and your rate of breath go up dramatically. You have a chemical cocktail that's dumped into your body, and your performance levels will often go way down. You'll lose the capacity to run fine motor skills. You'll have issues with visual tracking, or you may even end up with tunnel vision. Your IQ can fall up to 50 points, 50. So you may be operating, I don't mean to disrespect anybody, but you might be operating as someone who is blind, deaf, and clinically retarded under stress. And breath is our pathway back to taking control of that physiology and creating more effective performance during a time that often people will call as unthinkable. That's why I have incorporated breath into Krav Maga. That's why we've incorporated visualization. Visualization is essentially mental rehearsal, and your brain doesn't know the difference between throwing 100 punches at a bad guy and throwing 100 punches at a bad guy as you visualize it. So these types of training are not only powerful, they're low impact because you can't run in and do Krav Maga at a powerful, heavy level every day. So why aren't we doing these other things to propagate a sense of well-being, to increase performance, and to preserve the body and sort of the rest and recovery period? That's why we do what we do. There has to be a powerful connection between what you're doing, whatever it is, and these non-physical elements of training.
Right.
I think if people are missing that, they're missing a lot.
No, that makes a ton of sense. It's another tool in the tool chest.
That's right.
Why do you? I've seen you and heard you refer to. You made a distinction earlier between fighting, martial arts, and self-defense, I believe. But I've heard you speak about martial sciences. Why do you use that term?
The way that I think of it is this: as we teach Krav Maga, there are powerful connections between the movement you're making and the movements you're about to make, right? One facilitates the other. That concept of shared space or facilitation or intention. And for me, if I break down Krav Maga and its various movements into a family tree, and I begin to observe where one motor skill serves multiple defenses, or a series of motor skills show up in different defenses, and therefore they're related to one another like a family tree, I begin to start thinking about the connection between what we do and why we do it, the input and the output. And for Krav Maga, and refer to the brand promise I made earlier, which is if you have a question about what you're doing in Krav Maga, I have an answer, right? So what that really means is that I can see and understand the connection between what you're doing and the outcome you're seeking. In other words, we don't do anything unless there's a powerful reason to do it. And that connection between all those things is logic. It is powerful. It is replicable. And therefore, it looks more like science to me than it does art. And for that reason, that I even try to remind myself, there has to be a reason. There has to be a replicable reason that we do something. It has to facilitate something else or create a powerful result. And if I can keep myself thinking in that way, then I'm never teaching anything that's useless. I'm never teaching anything that is apart from everything else. So to make this sort of harmonious connection around everything we're doing, we use the word science as a means of communicating connection and logic and reason.
Okay.
Does that make sense to you?
It does make
Yeah.
sense. I'm with you on that. I see that. I've seen that in your school. I see that a lot in your Kravology videos or the videos you post there, where you speak about the reason why you're doing some very, in some cases, very small mechanical things, and oftentimes I think you'll talk about other reasons why you don't do other things. And it also seems like you, in doing that, either implicitly or explicitly, you've also created a curiosity in your students, not just to learn a patterned set of movements through muscle memory and repetition, but you've created a curiosity to really think about what they're learning and why they're learning it and how to apply it. And then maybe that extends to applying it in more dynamic situations that aren't the prescriptive practice that might come through a rehearsal.
Yeah, I think that the best way to describe this just in general is the practice of Krav Maga is the practice of life, right? Krav Maga is because we have training in life, and we have moments in life, and we have training in Krav Maga, we have moments in Krav Maga. So it's the best way to think of it is microcosm, and it begins to help you because you can get your hands around and think about, what am I doing and why, and what do these connections look like? And if I can get my hands around that and see it, get it out in front of me. A coach of mine once said, move the subjective to the objective, right? If I can do that and I can see it in a microcosm, I can apply all those lessons to the much larger picture in life, right? Which is much broader, much deeper. And I think one of the things that's been really useful to me is to begin to extrapolate the things that I can see that are happening in Krav Maga in my practice and in training other people, and begin to think more deeply about what's happening and why, and then begin to make those connections in the world around me and in myself. The goal of everything that I'm doing, and it's a lofty goal, is to be better, is to show up more powerfully for the people around me. I want to be a better husband. I want to be a more powerful dad. I want to be an advocate for my students and the community around me. I want to be, truthfully, I want to grow my tribe. How do I do that? How do I become a person that accepts more and more people? And how do I show up for those people? What makes that powerful? A lot of what I do is try to understand through this, what seems like this scary practice that I can get my hands around, understand what I should be doing much more broadly in life. I don't know if that really answered your question, but I think that's where it took me.
No, I'm glad you went there. You know, what am I doing and why? And that much more broad sense. I mean, you describe yourself as a number of things, including, I believe, a crucible coach, maybe life coach. I mean, these are things that extend beyond the explicit practice that's happening in an hour or two class of your Krav Maga gym. And maybe you just answered it, but why is it that something like the practice of Krav Maga just has so much potential, if not in almost every case, extends people to start thinking about all these other things, that it's really like a physical practice starts to become the foundation for asking all the types of questions that you just cited about all the other aspects of their lives?
Yeah, I think we've gotten away from what life used to be, Michael. So Krav Maga, for a lot of people, has become this practice that allows them to immerse themselves for short periods of time in what used to be the lessons that life taught us. So, communally or tribally, these things used to be called death practices, or we call them now death practices. But the idea that Krav Maga is a death practice shouldn't be scary. It just means that we're thinking about scary things. We are confronting scary things. And if you can think about and confront and work and solve scary problems, the lessons that come from that extrapolate to your whole life. And life in these, especially in these United States or in what we call first world countries or technology-driven countries, has become, in many cases, so easy. We're so far away from the way people lived even 100 years ago, that we've lost our connection to everyday risk, to the demand of a life where someone had to every day make powerful assessments and choices that had powerful outcomes. So Krav Maga is one of those things that allows people to experience that in an otherwise what I would call sort of easy life.
Right.
And
maybe
yeah,
too easy in a way.
Well, people are looking at this. When's the next Spartan race? When can we climb the next mountain? Right. So people are craving this. I don't even know if they've made the connection yet. They may think of it as like, well, we want to do something awesome. We want to, improve our mental toughness. Deep down, people are seeking life lessons that they have yet to learn because the quality of life they live has taken it from them. And they don't even know it. And so instinctively, intuitively, through the rattling of their spirit, they're hearing this call, go do something dangerous and learn something from it. I think people need that. One of the things we talk about a lot, Michael, is this concept of being a warrior. And it's not what most people think, because warriors definitionally serve. And so many people in today's world are serving or worshiping without even realizing it. Everyone serves or worships something. And so we're putting our faith in things that we may not want to because we haven't really grasped that idea yet. No matter what you're doing, there's something in your life that you serve or worship. Warriors give themselves to service explicitly. They say, instead of serving and worshiping sex or power or money, I'm going to serve and worship fill in the blank. And I'm going to live my life and train myself in a way that allows me to serve powerfully. And in that service, I'm going to make meaning. And in that meaning, I'm going to live a life that counts. People are searching for that. And they're running Spartan races. We have a crucible called corundum, which means reclamation in Latin. People are recognizing by the millions that something's missing. And that's what it is. Stop worshiping whatever it is you're worshiping implicitly and without your permission. Get clear about who you are and where you came from. I don't mean your mom and dad in Germany or Britain. Decide whether you are a creation or you're an accident. Decide how you want to live your life, and decide what service looks like in that optic. If you're not doing that, you're not really, in my view, living.
Yeah, that's super powerful. I just spoke recently to a gentleman who talks a lot about similar things in terms of explicit design to life versus life by default, or someone who's living by default. So he has a coaching practice called Life Design Center. And one of the ways he himself came to that, and I think enriched his own direction, is he facilitated a Native American style death ritual for himself that I think was 5 days of fasting and any visualization around a death ritual for himself that became really a foundation to everything he's done since.
Yeah, the people that are able to do that, I'm a coach as well. I was certified. I had a coaching practice for a while. I went through the Unbeatable Mind certification. I really enjoyed that as well. And I think the thing that people don't understand and became clear to me after I began coaching is this. This is an epidemic. There are people that you believe that walk around these United States or other first world countries or et cetera, and they look like they're happy, they're successful, they have, everything that they say they want, and they are dogged by shadows, by a feeling of being incomplete, unworthiness, shame, things that it's an epidemic.
And it's
so much.
Yeah, no,
it's insane. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. You and I think you hit it on the head. It's completely observable through Joe DeSena's Spartan race. I think he said 1 million people worldwide will do one of these things this year, and he has a greater goal of ripping 100 million people off the couch. And whether it's through that sort of event, or you've come across unbeatable mind coaching, or you're someone who's gone through a facilitated, Native Indigenous American death ritual, there's probably many different styles of this, but you do see people awakening to this all over the place. What I might call a recognition that we need adversity, that we grow through hard things.
Yeah, when I said corundum earlier, which means reclamation, in my view, we need a cultural, social reclamation. Our culture needs to understand that we are on the very edge, or have started down a very steep, slippery slope. And culturally, we need to understand that there is a connection between living and risk, between living and service, between living and growing your tribe, and legacy. And the things of this world have been powerfully misleading. And the imprint that things, terrible things that happen to us as younger people have a sort of gravity or an inertia that keeps us in the same orbit. And in that same orbit, we find less and less meaning, so we double down even more. You see this especially in type A personalities. And the doubling down of effort in a failed exercise is a terrible idea. And until people come to grips with the idea that what you're really looking for is a way to serve meaningfully, this epidemic is going to continue. Serving meaningfully can mean lots of things. It doesn't have to be the only thing you do. It doesn't have to mean that you're an entrepreneur. You can serve wherever you are, with whoever walks, by your door. I believe when people engage in purposeful service connected to their purpose, the people they need to serve will appear. It's happened in my life, and I've seen it happen in other people's lives, and this epidemic is out of control.
Yeah. No, those are great points. I know we could probably spend a ton more time talking about purpose, how to uncover one's purpose, some of the underlying principles there. You mentioned personal ethos earlier. Maybe just in respect for your time here today, let's talk a little bit to wrap up around some things you just mentioned about service and different flavors for everybody. For yourself, you've talked about growing your tribe. Is that part of your purpose right now? And I know people are going to listen to this. They're going to get very excited. They're going to get inspired by things that you, CJ Kirk, are personally saying, but not everybody's in Houston. Not everybody may have access to you personally. Can you talk a little bit about that? What are you doing to help spread access to some of these same things, and how are you growing that tribe? Maybe part of that question is ultimately going to be where should people and where people can they find you or find more information? Where would you direct people, and what are you doing around that?
The best place to find me would be on Kravology.com. And I think the reason that is the best answer for now is I'm dropping through the blog section of that website ideas that I think will help people percolate. And people come to me and they say, you're a coach and you're an instructor, can you help me kind of straighten this out? And if I'm coaching them, I certainly, that's one of the goals. But I think a lot of this has to be intentional and almost self-guided. So if you go to kravology.com, you'll see articles about purpose. You'll see articles about warrior and about service. There's an article coming up next week called Carry Your Own Water, which is really about how we shape our lives and our purpose, and how we shape the vessel and the water we're carrying, and then what does that mean in terms of balance. So kravology.com is the best place to go. The only thing someone needs to start turning the corner, in my view, is the intention to do so through awareness. We can't manage ourselves and we can't manage this process until we're aware that there's an issue. And once we're aware there's an issue, we can begin to prescribe very slowly changes, practices, things that we can do in our own life to keep our awareness high, to avoid the pitfalls of yesterday and the habits we've created. So for me, that intention and awareness is a powerful first start. If you want something to sort of gin up in you or your listeners, ideas that might lead somewhere, I think kravology.com is the best place to go for now.
Okay. Yeah, fantastic. And I think this talk is going to be a great step towards awareness for a number of people. Kravology, again, kravology.com, and we'll put some links to that. You mentioned a few of your topics. I think the series of articles leading up to and around uncovering purpose are a really good place for people to start to read and think. And then I believe you've also got the facility there for people to comment, ask questions, and maybe even begin to interact there. Is that part of extending the tribe and the community through that interaction?
Yeah. We don't have time to go through some of the deeply personal things that have happened to me in the last several years that have sort of shifted my perspective. I used to be someone who's very closed off. I used to just want my family to me, to shut out the world. And I had some very powerful things happen in the last couple of years, 5 years, that shifted the way that I see life and that I see the people around me. And so growing my tribe is something that's been not only intentional, but something that, almost needs to happen at a biological level. And your tribe can be described by your family, your community, the people you show up for. And a lot of times, it's sad to say, Michael, but for a lot of people, growing their tribe just means reconciling with their nuclear family or their parents, depending on how you look at that. A lot of people come to me, and a lot of the scars and shadows they have that create that kind of orbit they can't get out of is created by family relationships. So the first place to go in growing your tribe is to your own family. And it's really difficult to do until you realize that no one is perfect. We are all struggling, and that it's healthy for the person who's holding a grudge, a justifiable debit on paper, to resolve those things that are in their past that have created such powerful mechanisms in their decision-making processes, and they don't even recognize it. So grow your tribe. Start with your family. Look at your community. Look at people that are like you, and then begin to look at people that aren't like you. The goal is to continually grow your tribe and take baby steps. But when you do this, the meaning you're going to make is so far beyond anything you can describe or understand now, that I'm excited for people to start doing this.
Yeah, fantastic. Having gotten to know you a bit over the last 2 to 3 years, I find it very hard to believe that you were closed off, knowing the mission you're on at the moment. But that makes great sense to me, that if at one end of the spectrum is the entire world or universe, that at the other end of the spectrum, most of us need to start small. Start with ourselves, and then that can become a platform to serving others. Start with our smallest nuclear tribe, and potentially that extends to others. I mean, this has been a really good intro. I really, really appreciate it. I know there's so much more that you go in depth on. People need to read and watch what you do. Hopefully we'll have you back again in the future, and we'll hit some deeper concepts. But Chief Kirk, this was really an honor and a pleasure. I really appreciate the time and the insight.
Thank you, Michael. It's my honor, and I'm really excited for you and your blog, and I wish you the best with it.
Thanks so much. So that one ran a little long. It's got a lot of meat on it. And with somebody like CJ, you could easily go 2 hours, 3 hours. But I'm so grateful for the time I had with him. I hope we'll have him back again in the future and hit some other topics. In fact, he's got some big plans coming that he wasn't ready to talk about just quite yet. So keep an eye on that. I would almost suggest listening to this one again. There's a lot in there. I will definitely point out some highlights and some what I'd suggest as action items on the website. For this episode, go to manofmastery.com/008 for those show notes. I'll also link to Chief's Kravology website where you can read weekly articles on these same sort of topics. As for what's next here on the Man of Mastery podcast, by the time this airs, I will be off doing an incredible father-son event, maybe a bit of a rite of passage for my boy, and look forward to talking to you about that and about things that we take away from it here in an upcoming episode. Until then, another great way to stay in touch and get a preview of what's next. If you're on Instagram, go to The Man of Mastery, at The Man of Mastery on Instagram. I try to get some content out there almost every weekday at least, and you'll get some previews of episodes before they even air. All right, that's it for this week. See you guys next time. And again, thank you so much.